Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. For those of you whom I have not met, I'm Lisa Karnigsberg. I'm president and founder of Initiatives in Art and Culture. This is our third segment. Today, we are talking about something that could not be more timely, which is the power of words. Yesterday in the United States was Get Out the Vote Day. One word, 4 letters, tremendously important. So I am really thrilled to welcome an exceptional group of people to this conversation. Mark Hanna is Chief Marketing Officer of Richline Group and has been a leading light for me and for so many others in all issues regarding responsible practice and so many other things. Rena Kim, whom we're absolutely thrilled to welcome, is staff attorney, the Bureau of Consumer Protection, the FTC, Federal Trade Commission, and an entity of great importance. So to have you present in the conversation is exceptional. And we thank you very much for joining. Stephen Lucier, who is chairman of Forevermark and executive vice president, consumer and brands, De Beers Group, and someone whose commentary throughout the COVID period I have found to be enormously on point and very moving about the importance of objects and why it is that they select and carefully chosen arising in import because they can embody such significant emotions and be expressions of authenticity. Ronnie van der Linden, who is the president of Dimex and the DMIA and so many other extraordinary roles, including his involvement with the World Diamond Council. And Ronnie lights up the room for all of us. So we're just really thrilled to have you with us and your extraordinary presence. And finally, Sarah Yude, who is senior counsel for Jewelers Vigilance Committee, which anytime you hear JVC, that is what it is. And it's a wonderful organization that provides invaluable guidance. And I encourage everybody to seek out their counsel and collaborative support. So this is who we are. And the focus of the discussion is going to be that words matter. They have the power to spark emotions, challenge perspectives, and shape legal guidelines. So the discussion will look at the importance of terminology, words or expressions such as made in the US, quote, ethical, quote, natural, quote, sustainable, for the jewelry industry, producers, and consumers alike. So with that, I'd like to ask the first question to Rena. What role does the FTC play in crafting regulation and guidelines to ensure a level of standardization in the meaning of key terms ranging from ethical to made in America?
Thank you. I'm going to preface my remarks just by stating that very happy to be here. I'm very welcome the invitation. I do want to note that I'm here speaking in my individual capacity as a staff attorney at the Federal Trade Commission. So the things I'm going to say today reflect my views. I am not speaking on behalf of the commission more broadly or any individual commissioner. For those who are maybe joining us and may not be familiar with, I'd just like to take a moment to give an overview of what my agency does. And I think that will help frame the discussion. So my agency, the FTC, The Federal Trade Commission has, I like to think of it as almost a threefold mission. They, our objectives are to prevent business practices that are anti-competitive, unfair, or deceptive to consumers, to enhance informed consumer choice and public understanding of the competitive process, and then third, to accomplish this without unduly burdening legitimate business activity. So our agency is actually divided into two bureaus: the Bureau of Competition, which deals with monopolies, other areas that I think are not as relevant, and then the bureau that I work in, which is the Bureau of Consumer Protection. And that focuses in particular on preventing unfair and deceptive acts or practices that affect consumers. Our primary tool in this is a statute called the Federal Trade Commission Act, or FTC Act. And in particular, there is one provision called Section 5 that we focus a lot of our work on. The language, if you will, of the statute itself simply says, don't engage in unfair or deceptive acts or practices in or affecting commerce. And as you can imagine, that can be pretty broad. It can cover a number of different areas. And so, the Bureau of Consumer Protection at the FTC addresses a number of different things that affect consumers, like, scams, frauds, telemarketing. But in particular, and relevant for this discussion, are sort of deceptive claims in advertising. And that's where this focus on language really comes in. What we aim to do is to protect consumers against deceptive practices and deceptive claims in advertising, and also to help businesses and marketers and sellers understand how to stay within the lines and not run afoul. Because we would like for everyone to abide by the law so that consumers are protected. So along those lines, the Commission has issued a number of different industry guides that are intended to help marketers understand how best to stay within the right side of Section 5. And so I think the two sets of guides that are most relevant for today's discussion are the FTC's jewelry guides, which address a number of different claims and practices that often come up in the jewelry industry. And the shorthand is FTC's green guides, which deal with environmental marketing claims. So those touch on things like use of sustainable, natural, renewable, recycled content, those sorts of things. Now, these guides provide more detail about how marketers in these areas may avoid engaging in deceptive or unfair acts or practices. However, the jewelry guides and the green guides are not independently enforceable as the same way if you violated a regulation or a rule. Like if you violated the telemarketing sales rule, it's directly a violation. For the jewelry guides and the green guides, they are exactly how they sound. They're guidances, and if marketers can look to those guides to try to figure out how to adjust their practices. However, violating the guides or running afoul of the guides is not independently enforceable. We would still be looking at Section 5 to see if there's an actual violation of the law. The third guidance that I didn't mention yet is the Made in USA policy statement. And that is exactly as it sounds. I think especially now, Made in USA claims, Made in America claims we're seeing them more and more. And this is an area that is a topic of a lot of interest. And so that also reflects the Commission's views on where, when it comes to making Made in USA claims, marketers may end up getting too close to the line in terms of complying with Section 5 of the FTC Act.
Anybody want to respond? Mark, I know this is of interest to you.
Absolutely. First of all, I thank Rena and so many people down there that I've had the opportunity to work with over the years. They not just diligent, but quite passionate about what they do in protecting the consumer. So they obviously get my accolades. And I'm not just building that up, so I can say, but I think there's the importance, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later about reevaluation, is the importance. And the FTC demonstrated it in October by being willing to go back and reevaluate and relook at some of the things that they already do and they've already set up. But I believe there could be more done. I think the world changes daily. Everybody sees the infographic on the internet minute and everything that happens. We're involved in ever more so right now, a globally connected world. And I think that we could be a little bit more sensitive to global acknowledgement of certain practices, particularly substantial transformation when it comes to Made in the USA. And I know that the FTC is quite diligent about this, and I know the consumer sentiment is and consumer opinion on what's right and wrong comes first. So I acknowledge the great work they do. I think the reevaluation is something that I'm personally, and I think on behalf of the industry, the extent that I can say that, I'm going to continue to plead for, because there are certain things that I think economically for the industry could be far better, particularly in these times where Made in the USA and the American worker and things are just so much more important, and the pandemic has absolutely brought that forth. So again, I applaud the work they do. I think I will continually be asking for reevaluations in a certain way. And thank you, Rena.
So that really provides a wonderful introduction to my next question for you, which is in exploring some specific regulations of current import, could you discuss mechanisms in place and what other authority the FTC has to ensure compliance with its guidelines regarding nomenclature?
So I'll speak generally. We issue the guides, as I said, to provide, as it sounds, guidance to marketers, sellers, people in the marketplace to better understand consumers, to better understand particular practices. The jewelry guides focus on practices in the jewelry space. The green guides focus more broadly on not just the jewelry industry, but they address a number of claims that I think we're seeing more and more come up in the context of jewelry selling. We offer, I think it's actually currently being revised, but we offer business education, business and consumer education. We have a division that does a terrific job with graphics and sort of easy to understand pamphlets to sort of alert consumers on things to be on the lookout for. For example, if they're shopping for an engagement ring, which for a lot of people, that's their very first major jewelry purchase. And they're not really experts at shopping for jewelry. That's something that's significant. So we offer consumer education, but also for businesses as well, because we know a number of businesses, and we hear this time and time again, who, they may not be large, sophisticated operations, but they of course want to comply. And so for them, reading a statute or reading a, 200-page statement of basis and purpose, can be, might be challenging. And so we aim to offer education for businesses who are concerned and want to make sure that they're doing the right thing. In terms of what we do to try to ensure that these guides are being enforced, we do a number of different things. I can't speak. I'm not permitted to speak in particular about things that are currently being investigated, or whether things are under investigation or not under investigation. But I can say more generally, and this applies to the work we do, we look at a number of different factors to see what's happening in the marketplace. We receive complaints from consumers, from businesses, sometimes from trade associations, everything that comes in. We also have partners with Better Business Bureaus and similar organizations across the country, Attorney General's offices. We get complaints from a number of different areas. We always take a look pretty carefully at that. Another tool that we use, and again, this applies more broadly to the full panoply of what we do, and that includes jewelry as well. Occasionally we'll do something called a sweep. For example, if we've issued new guidance or refined guidance, we'll issue it, we'll have press releases, we'll try to draw attention to that. And then we might wait a few months or maybe up to a year and then do a sweep and take a look at how it's affecting the marketplace. Are we seeing the same problems coming up? Is there maybe something confusing about the way that rolled out? Are people getting the messages? There may be different tools. We may reach out to some people that we see are still haven't quite corrected their practices, or we may take another avenue. We may just ask for information. There's a number of different things we do, because at the end of the day, we want to protect consumers. I know most businesses don't want to run afoul of the law. So, we do our best to work with them to make sure that they are doing what they need to do. Now, it doesn't mean that everyone's going to get a friendly phone call. If they have a problem, there may be other avenues we take, but a lot of that's case by case and circumstance specific.
You mentioned issues that you are hearing about from consumers. What might, without sort of divulging specifics of any sensitive situation, what are some of the issues about which you are hearing most frequently now?
I think what's interesting to me is that as the market evolves in some way, and you're seeing new types of products come onto the market. I know in the most recent set of revisions that we did to the jewelry guides, lab-grown diamonds, by that I mean diamonds that aren't mined from the earth, but they're actually created or manufactured, whether in a lab or a fabrication site. 10 years ago, they weren't as common at all. And I think now you're seeing more of them on the marketplace. And so we're seeing advertisements for those products. We're also seeing advertisements for diamonds that fall into a separate bucket, which are products that are chemically, physically, and optically different from mined stones, but that may look the same. And those we would call sort of imitation diamonds. We're seeing more ads where they might be blurring the lines a little bit and making it a little more confusing, because now we're at a point where when you see an ad for a diamond ring, it's not just the same old diamond that 50 years ago was really the only kind of diamond that was being sold. Now there's actually a range of different products, and so there may be some confusion around that, or some consumers are curious and want to know more. But that's some of what we're seeing. But there's always sort of standard, which may not be as germane to this conversation, concerns with return policies or getting the product. A lot of times now, especially now, people shopping for jewelry online is a lot more common. And so there's often the discrepancy between what you see on the screen and what arrives in your box, or maybe it didn't arrive on time. I think if you're planning an engagement, that's a really big deal. So we're seeing some of those more, perennial issues that are not specific to jewelry, but that they're always there.
That's a sort of a wonderful lead in to my first question for Stephen. Drawing on De Beers Group consumer research, how important to consumers is transparency in marketing, and what issues are emerging as most important, and how is De Beers responding to the consumer?
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about the forces behind transparency, which to me is when we say transparency in marketing, in reality, much broader, because it's about transparency around where your natural diamond has come from and what's happened to it on the process. But I'm going to beg a little bit of indulgence of the audience, because I can't leap straight into that. The quote "power of words" to me is such a extraordinary title, and I reflected a little bit about how do we make people understand the power of words. And for me, I've been, I hate to say it now, 40 years since I joined NWR in New York and assigned to the De Beers account. So my whole life has been about words and what they mean to consumers, and they mean much more than what it says in a dictionary about words. And I just thought I would pick two just to make the point, and then I'll get back to the core of your question, Lisa. But one of them to me is the word forever. Now, think what you think when you think forever. If you're sitting in a car with your children, it has a completely different meaning. To them, forever means like after 20 minutes, it's like, Dad, it's taking forever. It's a word that means in that context not such great stuff. It's like, oh, forever. But I think when you think about it in the context of a diamond is forever, then the word forever takes on a whole different concept. And it's fascinating to think a little bit about where it came from. The word forever was originally written by a copywriter, Diamond is Forever, a woman named Florence Garrity, role model for those of you who watched Mad Men, the first woman copywriter the first famous woman copywriter, I guess, in America. And it came from the idea originally that it was the hardest substance known to man. And that concept of forever started that idea there. But that's not what the meaning she had for it. That's not the power of it. What Florence recognized was that what a diamond meant to people who were getting engaged was this promise of forever. The idea that when you got married, you were making this lifetime commitment. And that element of forever was there. The other element of forever for her was that a diamond, unlike anything that's fashionable in luxury, a diamond is eternally elegant. And what does that mean? It means that you can wear it forever and it will mean the same thing all through your life to people who see it. It has that power to communicate. And thirdly, that it was of enduring value. So it would be valuable forever. And that's why that word forever in the diamond context of natural diamonds, something that was literally created at the start of our world. Some diamonds over 3 billion years old, that's well before life, huh? Right from the beginning and right to the end. That concept of forever is an extraordinarily powerful word in the context of diamonds. And my other word, of course, is diamond. And I'm always fascinated, and I know that the FTC extraordinarily scientific about words. I'm not scientific. I focus on what it means to people. And if you look in the dictionary, it will talk about a diamond being a form of crystallized carbon, the hardest substance known to man. It'll often say natural gemstone and all those sorts of scientific facts. But I can tell you, all my life, I stop people on the street and say, tell me what you think when you hear the word diamond. And not once has anyone ever said to me, well, it's a form of crystallized carbon. It has never happened. What people say to me is, first, they often say, a diamond is forever, because that forever word is so powerful in connecting to diamonds. And then they say to me, do you know, a diamond is a, and they always use this word, is a precious. A diamond is a precious, unique, inherently valuable natural gem. I mean, some combination of those words. And the core of it, to me, gets back to this concept of preciousness. And it's not unique to diamonds. If you ask them about a wonderful natural ruby or an amazing emerald, you would get that same concept of preciousness. And that preciousness comes from a combination of the fact that the material itself is extraordinary. Its formation 1 billion years ago is extraordinary. The fact that it was in the center of the earth is extraordinary. And the fact that they're inherently rare and valuable things treasured. All of that together creates this concept of preciousness. So I'd always argue that really when one hears a diamond, particularly with forever, you're combining these powerful words to say, this is a promise of preciousness and valuableness that will survive well beyond me. That's really what that power of those words mean. And sometimes, I mean, I won't really talk about LGDs today, but it irritates me in the sense that they don't have any of those qualities, but yet they attach themselves to the word diamond. And I think that's why it's so important that in the FTC guidelines that you need to preface that, because the true meaning of a diamond to a consumer is about preciousness, valuableness, rarity, specialness, uniqueness. And that really only easily applies to a natural gemstone. So now that I've done my completely off the script thing, let me get back to the core of transparency. Transparency is not unique to the diamond industry. Sometimes we think everything is about us. And in part because of the history of an awareness around conflict diamonds, we think it's about us, but it's not about us. Transparency in supply chains, particularly in luxury, is an issue across all of luxury goods, not just diamonds. So there's a more fundamental force at play here. And that fundamental force, I think, has all to do with the concept of social purpose. And to me, social purpose is the new status. Think about that, what that means in luxury goods. If you thought about luxury goods and luxury brands 10 years ago, The status was a really simple idea. I can afford it and you can't. And I'm wearing it, and now everyone knows I can afford it. And hopefully a little bit of good taste thrown in as well. But it was inherently about my ability to demonstrate a lifestyle that others couldn't have. You know, just think of that lovely program in the US, Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. People wanted to show that they had this extraordinary wealth-driven life. Brands are not interested in that anymore. The new status is around what positive impact am I having? My brand, my product, my employees, what positive impact are we having? What world problem are we helping to solve? And status accrues to brands because people want to be associated with brands whose feeling that values that they feel they share. And that's what's driving underneath it all transparency. And why? Because let's take climate change and environmental impact. If you're Louis Vuitton or Cartier or Tiffany or De Beers, easier in the case of De Beers, you can't make any claims about that unless you know where your products come from. Unless you know the source of it, how do you know what impact it's had on the environment? How do you know if it's making a positive impact to the community? How do you know it's protecting wildlife? You don't. You can make a general statement about it, but you can't say this, in our world, this diamond on my finger has made a positive impact. Forget conflict. You know, that's just like a zero sum at the bottom of the entry. Has it had a positive impact? Is it something that I can associate with my values? And that's what's driving the drive towards transparency, particularly now when we look at the diamond sector. And it's why De Beers has invested in so much in things like the Forevermark brand and their tracer and pipeline integrity to give us the ability to provide that right through the chain. So then you get a whole new world of words. And I'm the first one to say, geez, I don't know what the difference is between these words, you know? So we start working on it. You know, what's the difference between origin? What does that mean? The origin of a diamond. What about its provenance? Is that different than origin, or are those the same things?
No.
About source, is that? So they don't mean the same. All three of these things mean different things. You know, we may have our own view at De Beers as we develop this. We believe that origin really relates to where the material starts its life. For us, origin is about mines and countries. When we talk about provenance, we think more about, well, okay, what companies are involved, the provenance. That's where, for us, De Beers comes in. You know, source to me always seems a little bit more like the method rather than the place. But the key thing here is we need to find a consistent, common and consistent language. Otherwise, the consumer is going to be confused, and we're going to, as an industry, confuse our consumer. So we need to begin to gel around these core meanings of these key words. Then we all need to use them in a consistent way and not apply them to ways where they don't exist. And having got that on transparency, then we get into the real complication of things like sustainable and ethical and responsible and what the difference is. But I'll leave it there because I'm sure others have views on that particular point as well.
I have a question, which is may seem a bit off tangent, but to me has congruence, which is when you speak about something embodying values and the values of the company or the values of the maker, does that also include what is the relationship to also the quality of creating and the craft involved? Because one of the things that is spoken about quite a lot, I'll just borrow the phrase from Glenn Adamson's book, is fewer better things. And I wonder how you're thinking, I've heard you speak on this, about those issues also relates to the words transparency and authenticity.
Yeah, I mean, I think the luxury world is I think the luxury world is changing quite considerably at the moment, and this concept of status is really not the whole story. There's much more to it than that. That's one element of change. I think status moving from money to social purpose and doing good. Again, because I think people are looking to brands to solve these problems. People are looking for companies who seem to be able to get things done. That's part of the reason. We're part of the solution. We need to be part of the solution. But the other one that I think is really interesting as well in this changing world is the definition of the word quality. I mean, people used to use that word a lot, quality. In luxury goods, what does that mean, quality? It's begun to get a word that I think has lost its meaning. And I think if you retreat to the real purpose of the way consumers will evaluate luxury going forward, the concept of quality, which is, when I think about quality, what do I really think about? I think about it like a machine. You set the machine, you work on it for a while, you get the machine, it bangs it out, and you have quality control at the end. They all come out above it. And you can manufacture quality. But luxury goods is not about manufacturing in that way. The true luxury goods, if you're going to get people to think the jewelry you have is extraordinarily precious, extraordinarily valuable, unique is a huge word, unique to them. Quality has to become something else, and it has to become, in the luxury world, craftsmanship. There's a difference. The difference between quality and craftsmanship are these. You need hands. And again, this is not a diamond jewelry issue. This is a luxury goods trend. They've identified, the Louis Vuittons of the world have identified this movement toward craftsmanship. And it's not easy for them because they're big volume producers of stuff. But when you see their ads now, you don't see big factories. You see people sitting at tables with sewing buttons by hand on the Louis. Why? Because you can mass market quality at a really low price, but you can't mass market craftsmanship. And that's what luxury is about. So, I think diamonds are extraordinarily well positioned to benefit from that, if only we tell our story well. What could be more craftsmanship than actually starting with the rough diamond and trying to work out what polished diamond is going to come out of that? And then actually doing it, you need people with an eye to see this. It's always, diamonds are part science and part art, and may they always remain so. But that's a true craftsmanship. And I haven't even got to the design of the jewelry and the craftsman and the making of the piece. So we're an industry that should be really focused on our ability to communicate how we bring individual skill and talent and eye and experience to the making of these things which people hold so precious, both the diamonds inside them, but but the jewelry as well. And it doesn't mean you can't make them in volume, but it means you need to work out where in that process has the eye and the hands been a part of it and created something with a creativity that can't be matched by something that you can bang out in a machine, as much as you want.
Agreed. And actually that kind of journey of the material is actually something that we plan to actually devote a session to. But the substance of your response relates very much to my last question for you, which is, do you have a view on the best ways for the industry to ensure that consumers can have confidence in their purchases and the statements made about them?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard question in our industry because it takes us a long time to get there. And if we don't get there, then then we get banged over the head by my colleague on the panel here for not doing it consistently. But and I think the FTC is helpful in that, and their guides are very helpful. But I think the key thing more is that the industry and leading players in it need to collectively understand first what these words mean and collectively commit to using them in the right way. And, we have plenty of organizations in our industry who collectively can get together and do that task, or at least we have real clarity on these new emerging words about the way in which they're used. Sometimes the definitions are easy, but they get misused. And partly it's purposeful, but mostly it's not. Mostly it's because I didn't really know that much better. And to be honest, a year ago, I'm not sure I knew the difference between sustainable and responsible or ethical either. You need to study and you need to learn. So I think we need to pull together our organizations. A lot of them are doing a lot of thinking about it, be it CIBJO or RJC. Ronnie's been thinking about it, I know as well. We need to pull these together and get real clarity that this is what the industry believes these things should mean. Now, we need to try to enforce that through collective will. And if it doesn't work, well, then we've got, the JVCs and the FTCs to help us. But I think most people are not trying to misuse them. Most people who do misuse them are doing it because they don't understand what they mean.
So thank you so much. And you've actually set the stage perfectly for Ronnie, whom I'd like to ask, as a major figure in the diamond sector, what do you see as issues of key import, such as fluorescence or lab-grown stones, expansion of product categories? Are they marketed as they should be to the consumer?
Okay, so firstly, thank you for inviting me amongst these incredible speakers. I feel so honored to be among all of you. Truly, I do. Well, let's see. First of all, I want to say, the major, what do I figure? First of all, I think Stephen, everybody that has spoken so far has covered a number of key issues. One of them is driving consumer demand. If we don't drive consumer demand properly, then we have nothing, because you can take it from the bottom up. And if there is no consumer demand, a lot of what we're talking about is not necessary. So how do we figure? You bring in fluorescence for one. Topic dear to my heart. I've never understood why the industry all of a sudden decided that fluorescence is a bad thing. Why we can't sell stones with fluorescence, when in fact fluorescence is actually rarer than diamonds without fluorescence, because I believe the amount of diamonds with fluorescence are somewhere between 20 or 30%, 25 and 35%. So you have a rare article there. Also, going back to what Stephen was talking, it has a lot to do with education and misinformation, which there is a wonderful blog that was put out by the Gemological Institute of America, dispelling the myths of fluorescence in diamonds, which I believe everybody should do a search and find it, because it'll compel them to look at fluorescent diamonds in a different way. Now, what was the other? We were talking about fluorescence again, Lisa?
Well, I had just given that as a potential example of things you see as issues of the day. And of course, we all are aware of the lab-grown issue, for example. And I guess then...
I think let's talk about the lab-grown. I'm taking it piece by piece. So let's talk about the lab-grown, something that myself, I've been involved with probably since the early 2000s. So I have my company Dimex, and there's lab grown. There was a time when we had two competing categories. We had the lab grown diamonds, the natural diamonds. We've obviously been to the FTC to talk about a lot of the guidelines and what a diamond is and what a lab grown, laboratory grown diamond is. I think that we'll fast forward to today, and in large part, thank you to De Beers as well. I think there's a lot more information out there. And the industry, both sectors of the industry, the lab grown and the natural side, have quite matured. And they have each found their own place in the industry. I think one of the problems that we have, and was touched on as well, is the possible deceptive advertising out there by some. And Rena touched on that it's not only in the lab grown, but there are other products out there as well that are diamond-like and looks deceptive. So I truly believe the lab grown plays a part in the industry. For those that are promoting the lab grown diamonds as they should for what they are, wonderful. Because I think a lot of the retail jewelers out there, now this is an experience I can tell you all about. When I first started, we had those that said, I wouldn't touch this with a 10-foot pole. I want nothing to do with lab-grown diamonds. That was prior to 2 years ago. Believe me, most of your retailers out there today. A lot of those, and including manufacturers who said they would never touch it, are now manufacturing the lab-grown diamonds. And a lot of the retailers today are selling the lab-grown diamonds. And a lot of the consumers obviously must be purchasing these lab-grown diamonds. So, you know, myself, when I first looked at lab-grown, I looked at it as a fashion, truly a fashion, a way for people to have a new category, a new product for designers to work with and enjoy, and consumers to have. So what I find very comforting these days is I think they're finding its level, its pricing level. Stephen had talked about earlier, and he is absolutely correct that the lab-grown industry was working off the back of the natural diamond industry. And at the time, that's how they were promoting themselves instead of promoting themselves for what they are. Today, I think there's a lot more education out there. People are looking. And once again, you know, I have to thank De Beers when they came out and said that they would start selling at I believe it's 800 per carat, and everything is 800 per carat. When they started saying that, more people became informed what better advertising was there. So you're looking at the consumers, and the consumers started researching it and had much more information on the lab-grown category.
So, Ronnie, what role do you think manufacturers play in ensuring consumers' assurance or confidence regarding the products they purchase?
Well, it's quite simple. We talked about compliance, and the manufacturers have to be out there and they have to tell the story about their product. And we look at the different, so we do have, for instance, JVC, and we have the FTC here among us. And, you know, this deceptive way of selling has to go away. And by the way, as Stephen said, that's really a small percentage of the overall industry. But what we want to see is, as a manufacturer, we want to be compliant. There are those of us that are members of the Responsible Jewelry Council, the RJC. We have BPP, the best practice principles. We have the Diamond Source Warranty, DSW. We have Signet's Responsible Sourcing Protocol. So there are a number of avenues out there for the manufacturers. Now, I believe it was Rena that said, and Mark probably following up, you know, for some of us, it's very simple, and we can become a member of, let's say, the Responsible Jewelry Council or the BPPs out there. But for the smaller businessman out there, a lot of the 200 pages that Rena was speaking about is very difficult to go through. We at the DMIA try to explain this to our membership. We try to explain it, as you know, all of us have been at trade shows throughout the world and trying to make it easier for everybody. And that's what we're looking at. So we talked about, and I'd be really, if I didn't bring up the SOW that the World Diamond Council is now working on. That is a way for everybody to join hands in the industry and become compliant with the laws and regulations that we have out there. And, you know, again, we need to also, when you see, we talked about deceptive advertising. We have a way to report this. We have Sarah from the JVC. When we see it, we should report. Sarah can speak to Rena from the FTC. But we as an industry have to, for lack of a better term, rat these people out. so that we protect our product?
Well,
You know, Ronnie, if I could just, at least if it's okay, I was reflecting on what you were saying about the natural diamond industry and the lab grown, and you know, De Beers with its Lightbox brand set out with a specific goal of trying to use what is unique about lab grown, the fact that we can make it in colors, we can make it really low price, trying to create an incremental market. I still get concerned sometimes by the number of people who aren't seeking to do that. You know, take the engagement ring market. You know, the market size is the market size, and they're not going to sell more units. Huh? So targeting that in a very direct way, and what I think back to the concept of a power of words, in a way that could spell trouble for us if it's not really done by being honest and transparent about what the product is and isn't with the consumer. And I worry in that engagement ring world because I hear sometimes communication that says things like, you know, both products are identical, have the same crystallized structure. The only difference is where they come from. Well, that's fundamentally untrue, because that's not the only difference. You know, the other difference is one is rare, inherently valuable, and will get more expensive and is precious, and the other is going to be made in greater volumes and the prices are going to come down, and they're different. So it doesn't mean that someone might not want to buy one fully knowing that. But I'm not sure to what degree they really always do now. And that's what worries me. And the reason it worries me is if they don't understand fully what they're doing, 5 years from now, I've got concern. And my concern a little bit is, what will someone think of our diamond jewelry industry if they've spent $5,000 today on a lab grown? And you might say, oh, it's not an investment, doesn't matter, but that's fine. But if they go into the store 5 years from now, or their younger brother goes into the store 5 years from now and pays $1,000 for exactly the same thing that they paid $5,000, I don't think they're going to be very happy. I think they're going to say, I thought you told me this was like a diamond. And the reality is it isn't. And then that ring on their finger, which was important to them, and they spent $5,000 on it, every time they look at it, they're going to think, oh, I don't know if this is so precious to me now, because, you know, it's like if I bought a Rolex now. I have a Rolex. Huh? If I had this Rolex now, if I went out 2 years from now and I saw Rolex selling these things for $500, I don't think I'd feel so good about the one on my, even though it told me the time. So I think it's important that people are really transparent in that. There will be people who want them. That's great. Doesn't matter. As long as they know what they're buying, then we've got a level playing field of in competing in what each product has. And that's what we're trying to do with the Lightbox brand, to be transparent and honest about what it is. And then it has some advantages. I can't sell anyone a blue diamond for $800 a carat. A natural, it's impossible. So, but I can bring color in that business. So that's where I'm hopeful that in 5 years we'll all settle down into this world of incremental product. But I think we've got to orchestrate our way through the next few years without making sure that we're not harming our consumer in the long run.
That's why we need certain insurance.
Well, I think one of the things that you're pointing to is that both understanding things and understanding words, it's a social compact or a social contract, and we have to be clear about, and that clarity can sometimes be difficult, but it is really, if I say this is green, do we all have a consensus this is green? Can this be the standard for green? Similarly, with the ring on my finger, which I'm trying to take off, is this a diamond and what are its attributes? That was a very reductive way of phrasing it, but I think the idea of social compact and social contract surrounding words and values is critical. And that points us perfectly to you, Mark. Given your broad experience throughout the jewelry industry, including marketing and compliance, do you think the use and meaning of key terms differ within the gold and diamond industries? And if so, or sectors, and if so, what are some of the key examples of such differentiation?
Thank you. I just want to add first that a lot of what Stephen said in the beginning, not the lab-grown conversation, but talking about transparency and so forth, and Ronnie added to that. I think that just transparency word is a word that is gigantically important to all of us as an industry. And I don't think there can be enough advocates for the transparency for our business in the entire industry. So kind of start from there. That second part is that I'm going to segue off of Stephen. I probably could have just said what he said. Whatever he said is good with me. But as Stephen was referring to precious, I'm the gold guy. So that's actually the Lord of the Rings ring. My precious. This is my precious. When I'm talking about the gold industry, I'm using the word forever also. Right? Forever beauty, forever value, forever trusted and forever treasured and cherished. So I think that we have a great commonality in the materials that we use as an industry. So before I get to the differences, I want to talk about the commonality. The commonality is we produce very beautiful, very rare, and very difficult to obtain, and now very monitored and very, I can't completely say responsible. Obviously, we've all got lots of work to do, but the fact that we have such good organizations like Sarah's and Responsible Jewelry Council and others, that our progress towards responsibility is gigantic. And I don't think that gets spoken about enough. There's lots of criticisms and a lot of them very deserved, but there's also a tremendous amount of great work that's been done, all the way from on the ground, human rights and so forth, all the way to sophisticated technology like Tracer or some of the blockchain-backed trust and verify programs. So they may not be for everyone, but they show that we can do it. We're willing to do it. We're going to do it where we need to do it. And I think all these add to the credibility of the industry. So when you get down to some of the differences, I first wanted to point out some of the commonalities. I mean, the obvious difference in gold and diamonds is the word carat. It doesn't mean the same in each. So assuming that a great deal of our audience is industry based, you'll know that K with K carat and C carat mean completely different things. And one's associated with gold, the K, one's associated with diamonds, the C. And those meanings sometimes are quite confused. But in the end, they're both talking about the precious materials that we work with. They may be defined a little bit differently, but they both are related to something very special in gold and diamonds. And Rena, I think that one of the shames of the new guidelines, and I feel this way, is that to me the word carat with a K here, because we're talking about gold, became really the trusted name in gold jewelry. It became the trusted brand. It was a brand name unto itself. And without minimums, I fear as a marketer, not just as someone who's looked to produce revenue for all of us, but as a marketer and as a consumer sensitive person, I think that brand carat gold has been damaged when there is no minimum. So all of us, we care about the industry. We care about what we say about our products. And this is a panel that is immensely immersed in making sure we say the right thing to the consumer and that we do the right thing in our companies all the way back. And it comes back to that transparency word, but it also comes to a word that I like called trustability. And I think trustability extends all the way to how we treat our people, to how our footprints in our communities, and not necessarily out there pounding on our chest about, look what we did for someone, but something that we are absolutely doing for the right reasons. So not sure I answered your question exactly, Lisa, but I think that the words that have been discussed so far are immensely important words, and transparency is certainly one of them. And my favorite is trustability.
There's another commonality, I think, between gold and diamonds in that both have light and warmth. One might not think about it that way, but as you were each speaking, I was conjuring the substance in my head and seeing that attribute for both precious substances.
Yeah, I do think that forever word is important. It's important for every part of our business, and you know, so that I'm calling myself now Forever Mark. Is that okay, Stephen?
Yeah, I'll let you have that, and precious as well. I can't really argue with Lord of the Rings.
I was just trying to trademark that, but anyway.
But you know, that timelessness is the essence of jewelry, which is that humanity, whatever word one wants to settle on, the impulse to adorn, to imbue substances with power, state, religion, tribal differentiation is so innate. That is a timeless impulse, and you can go through millennia, cultures through millennia, and it characterizes each culture. The materials may vary, so it may be that a shell is particularly important in one community, but so often one will find gold and diamonds going back a very long way. And the impulse to create and to adorn and to, if you will, worship and revere has always been there.
In a world concerned about cradle to cradle, in a world concerned about waste, in a world concerned about the negative effects on our planet of materials that are detriment in the end of their life, gold and diamonds really shine in terms of being materials that they're here, they're going to be here, they're not destructive to our world and our planet. The mining, yeah, we've got to watch our processes and improve on things completely. But the materials themselves, as something that's here, they're the ultimate recyclables.
Yeah, I think that's going to become more interesting. And I agree 100% with you, Mark. This idea that, consumers are still trying to work their way through what climate change really means, and how do they have to adapt their behavior. And the luxury goods industry is wrestling with this as well, in part because the big luxury goods players have moved from this concept of craftsmanship and making things that last your whole life and you keep forever. They've moved into more fashion, which requires something new all the time. So the thing you had 3 years ago now is out of fashion. So I need to replace it. And now you have the problem of okay, but I used a lot of resources to create that thing, and now what's happening to it? So they're focusing on that in a way. They've got a challenge because they're used to the volumes and they're used to the fashion cycle, and they're trying to work on how they can reuse the materials or how they could find other owners, all sorts of things. But fundamentally, they're challenged in that sector. It's not true with gold and diamonds. You know,
yeah.
you don't say my gold ring is no longer fashionable on my wedding ring. No, you're going to keep that forever. Similarly with diamonds, this concept of eternal elegance is very important because it means it's not the fashion cycle, and you can buy it, and you should feel good about wearing it your whole life. And then actually you leave it to your children because you want them to have the memory as well. So there's, this is, if you think about sustainability in the context of sort of this sense of I shouldn't be consuming stuff that's then wasteful because I'm not going to use it anymore. That's the opposite of what the precious jewelry world is in. We're in a world creating things that should last you forever. And it's because our materials are fundamentally precious. And, as Mark says, you can go back into the Bible. They'll be talking about gold and they'll be talking about diamonds because they were things that had a preciousness from the sort of nature's miracle, this natural miracle of these substances being created in the world so many billions of years ago. It gives them a preciousness. It's not marketing. I'd like to take full credit for creating the diamond dream. I didn't do it, I'm afraid. I wasn't around when they wrote it in the Bible. I wasn't around in 1492 when someone gave a diamond engagement ring for the first time. But
the other thing I did want to address is the word sustainability. I think that sustainability has two very important meanings. And the best I can do is put it all in one sentence, which is, it's not about sustainability at your company. It's about the sustainability of your company. And I think that there are a great many people realizing, for the better or worse, thanks to the pandemic or in spite of the pandemic, that attention to our natural world and attention to our business practices and attention to every point of light we have in our entire firm, this has become critical. It's not, I think, I'll throw two L words at you. It's not just about livelihoods anymore, it's about lives. And I think that we have now looked at this world in a very different way, all of us, all the way down to the kids, questioning why aren't they in school? And what should come out of this? And you're seeing it, if you read much of the financial press, read about just the move to the ESG investing, impact investing, and look at how much better companies with responsible practices and best practices, and De Beers is one of the best, have come out of this and have been resilient from these practices. So I think that everything's going in the right direction. These words are important words. These words we're hearing more and more about. Sustainability might be a little bit misunderstood. I think there's probably a lot of definitions. I still like the definition of leaving the world a better place than we found it. I've got lots of grandkids, so it becomes even more important. So
Mark, you gave us, if you will, you've pondered the S word, but I know that words beginning with R have been much on your mind, and you kindly provided us with a list of 9. So I'd like to pick one, and that would be reevaluate. And I wonder if you want to link it to the debates on heritage and made in the USA, and perhaps that has a broader relationship to the term responsible or rethink.
I think I already mentioned to do with the reevaluation at the FTC. And I know that's an organization that really does do it and has done it and has demonstrated it recently. I think it's, reevaluation now, just coming out of everything we're coming out of is a big word in every part of our lives. So, those R words I thought of you were resilience and reimagining, replication and reinvention and recycling and on and on and on and on. Every one of those words now is getting our attention. I think maybe the word resilience has never been used as much in the history of the world as it has been used in the last 6 months. So, but I think that, yes, Lisa, you picked the right one. Reevaluate is I think we are in the process, all of us, of reevaluating our businesses and how we do business. We have to be. We're evaluating simple things like, do we need to have our people back in offices? To much more complex things in terms of what is our footprint in certain places where we source our materials. So yeah, reevaluation is a very important process. And I think that rethinking how we do things and reusing our materials like Stephen was just talking about and many, many other parts of this. And eventually it comes down to relevance. Is relevance to not just our businesses, but relevance to our world. So, I would certainly, ask everyone, it's easy to pick on Rena because she's here, but that, we look at what we believe were the right rules. We believe what we thought were the right business processes. And we really look at those in terms of what does this mean for the world going forward? And what does it mean for people going forward? And you can take that and personalize it down to your own company. But yes, this reevaluation of our resilience and our relevance, I can take that on forever. But I think it just, the little word cloud I put together, which I was going to share, but I'm not going to for sake of time. but I can make it available to anybody that wants it. I think it points to just all the differences that we are now looking at ourselves and our businesses and our world that need to be reevaluated and will be reevaluated.
Well, Sarah, since you represent JVC, which is so critically important, as we've heard in this conversation, I'd like to ask you how the JVC supports the members' need to ensure compliance with FTC guidelines and the same group's opposition to some guidelines.
Sure. Thank you, Lisa. And I'd like to thank all of the panelists for leaving me to bat cleanup with multiple runners in scoring position. Lots of little things I'm excited to pick up on. So I think it's important. I think it's important to know sort of, the position of JVC, why JVC exists and what we try to do. So JVC was founded in 1917. And this was in response to the National Gold and Silver Stamping Act, which was passed and signed into law in 1906 by President Teddy Roosevelt. And essentially it allowed for a jeweler or a group of jewelers to sue a competitor for not complying with the Gold and Silver Stamping Act. So essentially for under-carating precious metal objects. And so JVC was formed so that a group of jewelers could get together as a trade association and try to help enforce those laws. So the true functionality of JVC is not just to be, to provide guidance and education to the jewelry industry, but to make sure that members of the jewelry industry understand and are able to comply with laws and regulations that apply to the industry. So part of the way that we support our members' FTC guides compliance is by conducting website reviews for new members. So we don't let people just join JVC. We actually evaluate them before they join to make sure that none of the claims that they're making in their advertising or on their website violate the FTC guides. And if they do, they're not accepted as a member of JVC. We also do ad hoc advertising reviews for our members. So if they have an ad they want us to look at to make sure it's in compliance with the jewelry guides and with other FTC guidelines, we will do that. We often send letters to members of the industry when we see a pattern or practice of non-compliance with the guides to ask for corrections to their advertising. And when that becomes difficult or really egregious, we will then escalate those items to the FTC to get their guidance on how to move forward with something that we think is violating the jewelry guides. Another way that we encourage compliance is that we have a new publication that essentially explains the jewelry guides and a number of other FTC rules, regulations, and guidance in plain English. And that's available for free on the JVC website, which is jvclegal.org. You can download it. You don't have to be a member of JVC to download this, guide. And, multiple people, I think, made the point, including Rena and Ronnie, that, for a large, sophisticated business, it might be, a normal practice to read, a large statement or rulemaking from the Federal Trade Commission, especially if you have in-house counsel, but so many businesses in the jewelry industry don't. And so JVC is kind of like everybody's opt-in legal compliance department, which is a crazy concept that I think doesn't really exist anywhere else. But we exist to help everybody in the industry understand and comply with these regulations. Of course, sometimes our members might not agree with the guidance that is in the jewelry guides. And so when we're working with, comment periods, so the FTC, when they reevaluate their guidance, they often open up comment periods so that everybody gets a chance to comment. We not only do we encourage our members to comment, but we will generally comment ourselves either on behalf of JVC or on behalf of multiple trade associations. And we seek comment from every sector of the industry, from businesses large and small and medium, and all the way from mining to retail, to make sure that we are representing the voices of everybody in the industry.
So again, a perfect connection to this question, which is how has the rise in influencer marketing in the US and abroad been reconciled with the FTC's stated commitment to transparency? And I know that's dear to your heart, so.
Absolutely. So, I think it's really interesting to think about influencer marketing as just the most modern iteration of something that's existed for a while. It's the same concept as an infomercial or an advertorial. It's just somebody trying to tell you, about a product, but they've been paid to do so. And that is the key information, right? So they have somehow been compensated for the act of telling you about a product, or that they like a product or something like that. And when a consumer is making a decision about whether to purchase something, that's pretty material to the information, right? You want to know that somebody has been paid to tell you that this handbag or this bracelet or something else is their favorite new thing, because you want to be able to fully evaluate the information that you're being given. So, of course, disclosure of this is incredibly important. The FTC has continually revised their guides about product disclosures and about, influencers, and there's lots of more recent guidance about it. But I think it's very important for influencers in the jewelry community to not just understand guidance about how to advertise jewelry, but also to understand guidance about how they're advertising themselves. And, one of the things that I like to say about the FTC guides, in particular about the jewelry guides, is that I look at them as a gift, right? So the FTC doesn't put out guides for every industry. We have the joy of getting insight into how the FTC might evaluate certain claims. We have so much more information than a lot of other industries do. And so I think it's incredibly important that everybody in the industry take the opportunity to learn that, because we've been given something that other people don't get.
I'm mindful of the time, and so what I'm going to actually make just a few closing remarks. We have a couple of questions. Please stay on for 5 minutes if you can, because they're excellent questions. But I also want to be mindful of the clock for those who need to go to another commitment. I want to express my heartfelt thanks to all of you for participating in this conversation, and I hope that we can lure you back for more dialogue and exchange and insight. And I'd also like to say that our next event is going to be October 28th. It will be a longer program in which we will be awarding our award for leadership in responsible practice, which last year was received by Fariel Zaruki, and that was a thrill for us. She is prominently associated in the constellation of De Beers, and hats off, it was a complete thrill to present that award. And she will be joining us on October 28th. And I'd also like to say thank you very much to everybody on the team who helps to make this possible, and a hearty thanks to De Beers for their collaboration, which has been ongoing. And we have turned something that was first thought of as a bridge into something that will go on. Our commitment is to do this monthly in perpetuity. So hopefully we can strive to be like the gold and the diamond and be forever. And
Right.
very grateful for the partnership. So those are my closing comments. I just wanted to make them so that everybody knows really this is a community that works to bring this to you. And we hope that you will join us in our journey. The two questions that I have are, and I'm just going to throw this out there because I'm sure you'll have different opinions or points to make. Does using the word sustainable in our industry dilute the impact of our efforts toward transparency and traceability and undermine our credibility?
Go for it, Mark.
Go for it, yeah.
Yeah, tough question. I think that the word sustainability itself, and we all see this, can be used in a broader sense or a narrower sense. And the narrower sense is pretty much focused on the ecology only or the environment only. In the broader sense, it's more like the word responsible in terms of looking at everything we do, from people to planet and so forth. So I think a little bit it's in terms of how you see the word sustainability and how you are in your context using that word sustainability. The UN Sustainable Development Goals, all 17 of them, have become an incredible focus for many, many companies. It's now a focus for a lot of our organizations, particularly the RJC. I know about that one for sure, who just made a complete association with the UN Global Compact to forward the Sustainable Development Goals. I think there'll be a little more education about that. But yes, I do understand that sustainability can be seen as broader or narrower, and we'd hope that most people see it in the broader sense of everything to do with from human to kids to the earth around us.
I think too, Mark, one of the greater issues with using that word is that, as with any claim that a business makes in advertising, you have to have substantiation, right? So you have to have information to back up that claim. So I think that one of the best things that a company can do in this space is, if you're using the word sustainable, you better define what that means and show how you're actually contributing to that.
Yeah, agreed.
If I may jump in here, sustainable is, I just make sure I'm not on mute. Sustainable is a word that we're seeing more and more often, especially in these times. I know in the last revision of the FTC's green guides, the commission was asked to weigh in specifically on how to advise marketers to use the term sustainable, because a lot of people want to use it. And where the commission ended up at that stage was that they didn't have sufficient evidence to give them a basis to essentially come in and define what it means. To Mark's point, it really depends on the context. It can mean environmental effects, like use of renewable energy sources, for example, or it may imply something that's completely different with respect to social, labor, economic development. There's a wide range. And so to Sarah's point, absolutely, marketers are responsible for the words that they use. There may be a group of people who sit in a room and decide sustainable means X, but if that is not what consumers acting reasonably under the circumstances would understand that word to mean, then that's a disconnect that's going to create a problem. Marketers at all times have a responsibility to think about how their claims are coming across to consumers. How are consumers seeing that ad, seeing that word? How are they going to understand it? And in that context, is what the seller is saying about that word, is that true? Does that comport with and accord with how the consumer understands it? And absolutely, for words, especially words that may seem a little squishier just because they could be contextualized in so many different ways, to Sarah's point, make sure you yourself understand what you mean and have substantiation for it. I think what we do see is a lot of people throwing around words like sustainable, natural or renewable, and there's no clear definition, there's no clear understanding on their own part of what they meant when they said it. It just sounded good. The FTC expects marketers to have a basis for making their claims and to make sure that what they're saying is consistent with how consumers understand it. And one way to do that may be to say, our product is sustainable because it's made X, Y, and Z. If you're giving more specificity in what you mean by something like sustainable, or what you mean by, made with recycled content, or, created in the United States, that provides more clarity for the consumer, and that diminishes the likelihood that they will be deceived by what you're saying.
If that clarity isn't there, that's why we have the JVC. That's what we're saying earlier. If they're in that gray area, send it over. Let somebody review it and find out whether or not it's being deceptive.
Yeah, I think it's a great area to try to get some commonality of understanding across the industry, and we can pull together, because I sort of agree with Mark. I mean, I think the broader definition is probably the better result, that looks at both socioeconomic impact, environmental, as well as the use of the product post-sale. All those are factors which I think are important to consider before it gets used just to represent one thing while being perhaps detrimental in another. It needs to be a holistic definition, because it is such a word. Back to the meeting, this is a power word, and consumers may have some sense of what it is, but we need to make sure that we're using it consistently, whatever that final agreement is.
And again, to make sure that it ties with how the consumers understand it. I think we've seen this in other contexts, with other environmental claims. Folks in the industry who've been around for a while may understand, biodegradable, just for an example, means a certain thing. But with consumer perception studies and actually gathering evidence from consumers, average consumers, not people who are sophisticated in how landfills operate or how plastics biodegrade, they may have a very different understanding. And in that case, when it comes to advertising your products, the consumer's interpretation of your terms and the consumer's interpretation of how those claims are being made, that's what's going to be dispositive. And so if the industry gets into a room and decides it's one thing, but it's completely off the page from how consumers understand, there's going to continue to be a problem. Yeah. There has to be that connection to what the average consumer, your reasonable consumer, how they're going to understand that term, and to make sure there's no deception.
It's a new emphasis, to go back on Mark's word, or the centrality of transparency, which leads us to the next question, and we have 4 now. The next question is, how in companies like De Beers and organizations like the WDC, how can companies like De Beers and organizations like the WDC expect consumers, parens, and any of us, to trust their use of words like, quote, ethical, while continuing to employ the term, quote, conflict-free to describe all diamonds resulting from the Kimberley process? This person goes on to say, this absurdly narrow definition is inadequate at best and willfully deceptive at worst, etc. So the core question is,
shall I start on that one? I'm always careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater when people talk about the process, because this is not an industry process. This is a government process started by the UN, of which the industry pushed hard in order to get it up and running, and we continue to try to work inside to improve it. But it's very important to recognize that a company like De Beers, and I'm sure many others, we're not alone in that. We're not focused on that KP as the answer to everything. It's not. You need to go beyond that. We certainly feel that the case at De Beers. So we started by setting up internally what we call our best practice principles. At the time of their establishment, they were unique in the industry because not only did they police us with external auditors against a set of standards, but we actually required our customers, the site holders, people who were buying from us, as opposed to our suppliers, people who were buying from us, to meet them as well. And that was quite a unique thought at the time, that actually to require someone to buy from you as a customer, they had to meet standards. But it was important in our industry in terms of the value chain. And then we moved from the BPP to saying it's not enough for it to be De Beers. This is not about competitive advantage. This is about a reputation within our industry. And so that's where, together with others, we set off on the concept of the RJC as a founding member of the Responsible Jewelry Council, in order to build something that could go well beyond what the KP can do in its own right, focused on the particular issue of conflict. To their definition is not enough. We needed more. The RJC is part of that. But then we keep thinking that's not enough even. We need to go beyond that to even give consumers who are interested, more options or more confidence. So then we set up our own brand, the Forever Mark, to be able to provide not just a general feeling about diamonds, but that specific one that's on your finger. And now we're investing in the technology around things like Tracer and other traceability technologies that will allow us to do things that we could not technically do 10 years ago, which is to be able to track individual diamonds through technology all the way through to the final consumer. So I think the answer to the question is, don't look for one thing to solve all the problems, because it won't. Doesn't make it a bad thing. It just means that you need to do other things as well in order to meet the consumer requirement to feel good about the diamonds that they own and buy. And each company can focus on what it can do. We can look after very directly our own production, because we know what happens, where it comes from. We know the positive benefit it has. We can look after our own customers, site holders, in terms of the way in which they do it. And then we can present ways for consumers to be able to tap into that and seek to expand those across the broader industry over time. So that's our journey, and that's why we're proud of what we do.
Well articulated, Stephen. And as far as, if you're always going to find somebody that wants to beat the system and looking to beat the system. But the bells and whistles that we have in place today go so far and are constantly being looked at and improved, as is, I mentioned earlier, the SOW, the system of warranties. We are at round 2, providing assurances to those that are making purchases, and assurances from, I always say, we talk about know your customer, know your supplier as well. Know your supplier. And we have these chains of warranties that you're going to track it back. And those of us that have been audited in industry, we've been audited. So people know, people in industry know the assurances at the counter, the last 18 inches are provided to these stores and these retailers by their suppliers. So I would say that we have a pretty darn good system in place right now, and constantly looking to improve it. It's being reviewed 24/7 around the world. So Stephen, I agree with you. And, there are different people out there branding in different ways, but we also, somebody like ourselves, the Diamond Manufacturers and Importers Association, we're looking at those that don't have the brands as well, and the generic side of the industry, of which, kudos once again to the Natural Diamond Council and for what they have presented to all of us recently. I mean, this is all good stories, all feel-good stories. And that's what we need to continue to look forward. As far as those that want to beat the system, we have the law at our fingertips here. Let's find them and point them out to everyone.
I could probably just add a short sentence about RJC that Stephen mentioned back to the beginning. It's constant improvement, it's constant learning. And I think one of the great advantages of the RJC program that isn't talked about much is that all of us that are RJC members share. We share our experiences, we share our pluses, we share our minuses. We try to make a better audit process. We're looking at codes of conduct that and adding things that we didn't think about previously, like wildlife or biodiversity or things like that. So it is a constant improvement. I know sometimes the word journey, is a little bit overused, but the bottom line is that's what it is. It's a journey to continuous improvement. And the members all have something to say about that, from the smallest member like Eric Kelso with one store, to Stephen and so forth. So it's there, it's happening, it's all in the right direction. It's right, it is know your customer and know your supplier and know your auditor for that fact. So we'd say join us, be part of the making things better, and we believe in what we're doing, and hopefully we're doing the right job for our members as well.
One of the things about, I'd like to actually go back to something you say, Mark, often, which is ever better.
Yeah.
And when I think about Iris van der Vecken, who is the executive director of the RJC, and her approach to these issues, that deep commitment to ever better is deeply present. And change is not just an act, it is a process. So I thought you summed it up really wonderfully. Now to our next question, if I may. Essentially, Rena, this person would like to know, I refer to them as this person because there is no attributed author. When does the FTC take action for entities that do not respect their guidelines? So what are the ramifications and when do they ensue for non-compliance?
I can't speak to the particulars of any specific case. I can say, generally it really depends on the circumstances and on the actual case. I think it will vary, but depending on the issue at hand and sort of past history, for example, if it's the same company that's gotten a warning letter, for example, or if this is a player in the field where we've just sent a whole slew of warning letters on a recurring issue, those will all feed into the types of actions that we will take. So there's no one strict formula. If you do X, we will do Y. There's a range of things, and it really depends on both, the egregiousness of the conduct and what we learn from the company itself. I mean, there are some cases where a company just missed something, or they slipped, or they misunderstood something, versus, that's something different than a company that knows they're lying and they keep pushing the lies because they know it will help them get sales. So it will really depend. There's a number of different factors that we take into consideration.
So I just want to add that for everybody listening, that two things I found incredibly valuable. I sign up for every alert that I think is relevant to me, but the FTC alerts and CPSIA alerts, for that matter, are quite good. And what you get is, once a day or a couple times a week in your mailbox, things that are happening that you don't want to do, and see that they are being addressed by people. And you can learn an awful lot from what's going on around you. So my suggestion is sign up for the alerts. It's a wonderful world we live in now, where you can get that information instantaneously every day if you want it.
Okay, so the final question is, final in this instance, not ever, questions never stop, which is a blessing and a mercy. But this question is, what action does the JVC take when potential members and members breach the FTC rules? How does the FTC respond?
So I'll start, and then I can kick it to Rena. So as I said, one of the ways that we evaluate our potential members for membership is by looking at their advertising and looking at their websites. And if we see issues, we will get back to that applicant and say, okay, here's the 10 things that you need to correct on your website before we will consider you as a member. And, most of the time, these are businesses who want to be members of JVC. And if you're a business that wants to be a member of JVC, you're interested in doing the right thing. You want to be part of an ethical and compliant industry. And so most of the time, businesses will make the corrections once we explain them, and move onward. We occasionally have applicants who don't want to comply with that, and we say, thank you for your interest, come back to us when you've made these corrections. If we see a member of ours who is advertising incorrectly consistently, we will reach out to them proactively ourselves and explain the particular sections of the guides that are relevant to that industry, to that product, why we think that their advertising is in violation of the guides, and how they might make corrections going forward. If that doesn't happen, then generally that entity can't stay a member of the JVC. You have to agree to a specific code of conduct when you're a JVC member. And one of the things that you agree to is compliance with the jewelry guides. When we see a particular pattern of practice of non-compliance, we will escalate that. And there's a couple different ways that we can do that. One, of course, is by going to the Federal Trade Commission and saying, hey, this is what we're seeing in the marketplace. Here's a collection of advertising having to deal with this issue. Please take a look at it and let us know what you think. We also have an avenue within sort of, state law enforcement. So we sometimes will report issues to state attorneys general offices in order to deal with state law. So there's not just federal law that applies to selling products in the United States, but individual states sometimes have specific laws and might want to deal with cases of fraud or things like that. So we will often work with sort of, with state attorneys general to ensure compliance with not just the jewelry guides, but with, general issues that come up as well.
And as I said before, information we receive from JVC, we always take a look at it very carefully. What actions we will take as a result of what we're seeing will, again, depend really on the circumstances, on what the actual facts are and what the past history is behind that particular company. So there's no automatic formula. If it comes from JVC, we do this versus that. It really depends on the circumstances of each instance. But I will say that we take all of this into account and we review these carefully as they come in.
JVC certainly puts their facts together when presenting, because I was a witness to it myself. So they do a great job.
Well, I want to express our thanks once again to each of you. So wonderful to have this time to talk, to hear your views, to discuss these questions. You have already generated some ideas in my head for future webinars, since we hopefully are here to stay. One of my favorite expressions is world domination for good. And I truly appreciate it. And again, thanks to De Beers for this wonderful collaborative journey. And we wish you all a splendid day, and we hope to see you on the 28th. But should you have questions or queries, send them in, please. We will have the questions answered if you have a specific person that you would like to address, or we will send it to those that seem appropriate. And we love to engage with you, so please do not hesitate to reach out. So wishing you all a splendid either cocktail hour or
That's me.
luncheon or tea time, and hoping to see you very soon again. Thank you all very much for joining. We greatly appreciate it.
Stay safe.
Thanks, Lisa.
Everybody. Cheers.
Thanks all.